a retired military veteran named Frank Moses, wakes up and begins his daily routine. For 2 years, he has lived completely alone. The only person he regularly talks to is Sarah, a customer service representative who handles pension complaints from military retirees. Frank has no family, and even on Christmas Day he spends his time alone at home. His only real source of comfort is when his pension checks arrive in the mail, giving him a reason to call Sarah and ask her out on a date. Late one night, Frank gets out of bed to go to the bathroom, only to realize a team of elite special forces operators is already inside his house, preparing to execute him. Relying on his sharp military instincts, Frank swiftly neutralizes every single intruder. However, the attack isn't over. Several hitmen are still hiding outside, preparing a secondary assault. Frank heads down to his basement to grab his tactical gear. The hitmen rain bullets on Frank's house and throw a grenade inside to finish him off. Their efforts prove useless, as Frank has already set a trap and launches a devastating counterattack. Meanwhile, Sarah has just returned home from dinner. As she relaxes, Frank suddenly breaks into her apartment. Terrified, Sarah screams and thinks Frank is a creepy old stalker. Before she can process what is happening, Frank tells her they need to flee together. With no other choice, Frank is forced to kidnap his dream girl. He apologizes for the unromantic first impression, explaining that it is strictly for her own protection. The story then shifts to Cooper, one of the CIA's top covert operatives. That afternoon, Cooper executes a target, framing the hit to look like a suicide.
Listen, I can make you rich.
Once the mission is wrapped up, his supervisor, Cynthia, meets with him to assign his next target, Frank Moses. At the same time, Frank pulls up to a roadside motel to hide Sarah. He is forced to duct tape her to a bed because she refuses to stop struggling, leaving Sarah behind. Frank goes to meet his former colleague and close friend, Joe. Both men used to work for the CIA, and Frank asks for Joe's help to identify who ordered the hit on him and why he is suddenly a target years after retiring. Joe informs him that the hit squad that came after Frank also murdered an investigative journalist in New York City. Frank warns Joe to stay vigilant, as his life is likely in danger too. Meanwhile, Cooper discovers, through tapped phone lines, that Frank has been in frequent contact with Sarah. Capitalizing on this lead, Cooper dispatches agents disguised as local police officers to track down and detain her. Frank arrives just in time to rescue Sarah, and she finally begins to trust him. Just as they make their escape, Cooper intercepts them. Frank manages to temporarily disable Cooper, but it isn't enough to drop him completely. Frank sets a trap by tipping off the local police department, bringing squad cars swarming to the location. Once Cooper is drawn into the area, he finds himself completely surrounded by law enforcement, allowing Frank and Sarah to escape. Frank isn't the only target. A CIA assassin visits Joe's retirement facility that afternoon to eliminate him. Confused by the sudden turn of events, Frank visits the mother of the murdered journalist. The mother mentions that before her daughter was killed, she mailed a postcard. Frank realizes the code written on the postcard is a clue pointing to where the journalist hid her investigation files. Inside a hidden book, Frank finds a piece of paper listing several names tied to a past operation. Suspiciously, almost every person on the list has died recently under tragic circumstances. The only surviving contact left is a pilot named Gabriel. Since Joe's name is also on the list, Frank immediately calls him to make sure he is still alive. Meanwhile, Cooper grows curious about Frank's true background. As Cynthia had dismissed him as a harmless, low-level retiree, to help Cooper defeat him, Cynthia grants him access to the subterranean vault housing top-secret files. The vault keeper, Henry, reveals that Frank is a legendary figure, the absolute best assassin the US government ever had, with a record that includes eliminating terrorist leaders, taking down drug lords, and overthrowing foreign governments. Frank travels to meet another former operative named Marvin. Marvin's name was also on the hit list, and news reports claimed he died in a fire 2 years ago. However, Frank knows Marvin faked his own death after retiring from the CIA due to his intense paranoia. It turns out, Frank and Marvin are old teammates. Marvin's paranoia was justified all along. He maintains detailed records of every mission they ever executed. Looking through his files, they identify a single joint operation where every person on the hit list was present. In 1981, Frank and his unit were deployed to a small village in Guatemala to clean up the bodies following a massacre committed by government forces. Someone in power is now terrified that the truth about Guatemala will leak, prompting the systematic elimination of everyone involved. Wanting to uncover the mastermind, Marvin agrees to join Frank. Together, they locate Gabriel, the pilot from the list. Initially reluctant to speak about the Guatemala mission, Gabriel agrees to cooperate after learning his life is in immediate danger. Gabriel reveals that back in 1981, he was assigned to airlift the officer responsible for the massacre out of the village. But before he can name the officer, an armed hit squad ambushes them. Marvin's instincts prove correct. They had been shadowed the entire time. Despite being surrounded, the attackers are no match for Frank and his team. They eliminate every target, and Marvin even takes down a female operative disguised as an elderly woman. While they manage to escape the firefight, Gabriel is killed before he can reveal the identity of the mastermind. Realizing that the only way to get the truth is to break into CIA headquarters, Frank reaches out to an old acquaintance, Ivan, a high-ranking Russian intelligence officer. Frank saved Ivan's life years ago, and Ivan still owes him a favor. The next day, Frank and Sarah infiltrate CIA headquarters, with Frank disguised as a visiting general. Thanks to Ivan's forged credentials, they bypass main security and head straight for the classified archives. Even though Frank is trespassing, Henry, the vault keeper, warmly welcomes him since they are old friends. Henry helps Frank retrieve the classified file on the 1981 Guatemala mission. Before leaving, Frank makes a detour to Cooper's office to confront him directly. A brutal fistfight breaks out between the legendary veteran and the CIA's top young agent. Frank manages to overpower Cooper, steal his security badge, and escape. Bleeding heavily from a gunshot wound, Frank triggers the building's fire alarms to cause chaos. He crafts an improvised flash grenade from office supplies to disorient the guards, blending in with evacuating personnel as firefighters arrive on the scene. Marvin waits in the parking lot in a stolen ambulance. To Frank's surprise, Joe is sitting inside. He survived the earlier attempt on his life and eliminated the assassin sent after him. Meanwhile, Cooper demands to know why the agency is burning its top former operative, but Cynthia refuses to answer. Frank's gunshot wound requires immediate medical attention, so the team visits Victoria, a retired MI6 assassin who still takes freelance contract work on the side. Victoria patches Frank up and joins the crew. The stolen CIA file reveals a critical lead, a name that the murdered journalist never managed to discover. However, reaching this individual won't be easy, as he is heavily guarded by CIA contractors. When Cynthia catches wind of their plan, she orders Cooper to intercept them immediately. The target is Alexander Danning, a powerful arms dealer under government protection. To gain access to Danning's heavily fortified estate, Joe disguises himself as an overseas buyer interested in a weapon deal. Outside, Victoria and Sarah set up a sniper vantage point to monitor security patrols. Danning takes Joe to his panic room to negotiate. Mid-conversation, Frank appears, having quietly taken out Danning's bodyguards, and begins a hardline interrogation. Under intense pressure, Danning confesses the truth. The lieutenant who ordered the Guatemalan massacre is now the Vice President of the United States, with his presidential campaign launching the following year. The Vice President ordered the execution of everyone tied to Guatemala to bury his past. Outside, FBI agents guarding the estate realize the perimeter has been breached, and Cooper arrives with heavy backup. Victoria alerts Frank that they are completely surrounded. Cooper gives Frank 1 minute to surrender or face immediate execution. To buy the team time to escape, Joe sacrifices himself. He puts on Frank's coat and walks out the front door, posing as Frank. Before he can say a word, a sniper shoots him through the chest. Frank and Marvin break out through a side exit, while Victoria provides covering sniper fire from a nearby ridge. During the chaos, Sarah slips down a hill and is captured by Cooper's men. Frank, Marvin, and Victoria manage to escape when Ivan pulls up in a getaway vehicle. The team mourns Joe's sacrifice and regroups. Facing the Vice President of the United States makes them massive underdogs, but they refine their strategy. Shortly after, Cooper receives a phone call from Frank. CIA intelligence immediately traces the signal, but Cooper is horrified to learn that Frank is calling from inside Cooper's own home, holding a gun near his family and promising retaliation if Sarah is harmed. Panicked, Cooper rushes home with a tactical squad, only to find his family completely safe and unharmed. Frank had already left. Frank's visit wasn't just a warning, he also left a Guatemalan intelligence file on Cooper's desk. trusting that Cooper is an honorable agent who will do the right thing. To verify the document's authenticity, Cooper interrogates Sarah in custody, but she refuses to break or betray Frank. The following evening, the vice president hosts a high-profile black-tie gala. Marvin sneaks inside disguised as a hotel waiter, while Igor and Ivan blend in as wealthy guests. Once the dancing concludes, Victoria steps outside and locks the ballroom doors from the outside using her necklace. Ivan releases tear gas into the ventilation system. A Secret Service agent notices Victoria acting suspiciously, but she quickly neutralizes him. Panic erupts as guests smell the gas. Security attempts to evacuate the vice president through the main doors, but finding them locked, they reroute him toward the back exit. As they reach the exit, Victoria uses a heavy machine gun to disable the vice president's armored limousine. Ivan detonates a pre-planted explosive under the backup transport vehicle. With their vehicles destroyed, Secret Service ushers the vice president up a stairwell. Cooper arrives on the scene to apprehend Victoria, but Marvin and Victoria continue to pursue the vice president, forcing his security detail into a corner. During the firefight, Victoria takes a bullet to the shoulder. With incoming reinforcements closing in, she tells Marvin to push forward without her, preparing to make a last stand. Meanwhile, the vice president reaches the ground floor lobby, only to be blocked by Marvin, who reveals a vest packed with explosives under his jacket. A getaway vehicle suddenly pulls up to rescue the vice president, but it turns out to be a trap set by Frank. Realizing what is happening, Cooper leaps onto the hood of the car to warn security, but he is too late. Frank ambushes the detail and kidnaps the vice president. Shortly after, Frank calls Cooper to arrange a trade. The vice president, in exchange for Sarah, Cooper agrees and heads to the designated meeting location.
Any minute, the whole world is gonna drop on you.
Cynthia arrives at the exchange site with Sarah in tow, accompanied by Alexander Danning. It turns out Danning was pulling the strings all along. The vice president was merely his puppet, funded almost entirely by Danning's weapons money. When the vice president tries to stop the confrontation, Danning cold-bloodedly shoots him. Cynthia orders Cooper to handcuff Frank. However, Cooper, disgusted, after realizing he was used to cover up state corruption secretly, hands Frank the key to the cuffs. Cooper draws his weapon and shoots Cynthia, while Frank and his team eliminate Danning's mercenaries. With the mastermind dead, the crisis ends. Cooper promises to clean up the crime scene and clear their names, allowing Frank and his crew to walk away free. Frank and Sarah leave together, finally starting their relationship.